This Sunday, are Vermonters ready to pay higher taxes?
We are out of sync with the rest of the Northeast.
Governor Phil Scott again trying to restrain State House Democrats who seem ready to expand the social safety net.
But they're on a mission, it seems as though this year. They know they have the numbers, they know they have the supermajority, and I think they're hell-bent on making this happen.
From universal paid family leave to expanding access to child care.
The governor always talks about his support for child care, but as long as I've been here, as long as he's been governor, he doesn't want to come up with resources at the scale of the problem.
Are we heading for another showdown in Montpelier? Plus, the fight over abortion medication and Donald Trump in 2024. Governor Phil Scott makes his case ahead on our Sunday program.
Good morning again, everyone. I'm Stuart Ledbetter. This is NBC5 In Depth. Phil Scott won a fourth term in a landslide last November, but he is still struggling to advance his agenda at the State House, at least so far. The election also gave Democrats unprecedented majorities, prompting conflict with the governor over new spending, higher taxes and fees, and whether Montpelier will do much this year to accelerate housing construction. One of those new spending items focuses on expanding access to child care, increasing state subsidies to families so they can afford a slot, and raising wages for workers in the field. This week, hundreds of people turned out for a rally on the State House steps to press for a solution. Governor Phil Scott joins us this morning. From Montpelier, Governor Phil Scott, thank you for your time. Thanks for coming back on.
Thanks for having me.
I want to get up to date with your take on action at the State House to this point. We're well past crossover now, and you have been pretty public the last couple of weeks in your concerns about what the Democrats are doing, in particular, for example, with the House budget. Quoting now, you said the $500 million in new taxes, fees, and penalties, which could eventually pass, even if I veto it, because they have a supermajority. If that happens, we'll not only have squandered this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, we'll have turned it into a liability. That's pretty strong. What kind of reaction have you had?
I have heard nothing back from anyone from the legislature on my comments. But I think from the majority of people I speak to out in the real world, outside of the Gold Dome, fully appreciate what I've been saying and are concerned about the affordability of Vermont. I've been talking about this for 6 years, and we've been trying to rectify that by making sure that we don't raise taxes and fees and so forth. And so it seems as though the legislature, in some of the actions they're about to take, would unwind a lot of the good work we've done over the last 6 years. Again, we haven't been able to reduce taxes like I'd like to, but we've been able to keep them from being raised, raising fees, raising taxes, so that we can get back onto a level playing field with the rest of the Northeast. We are out of sync with the rest of the Northeast in terms of the high tax state and fees that are exorbitant.
I'm struck by what you said. You have not heard from any of the Democratic leadership about your concerns over the direction they're taking?
Not in particular, no. I meet with them on a weekly basis, the pro tem and the speaker, and they acknowledge that we have a difference of opinion in the direction we're heading. And we do have our cabinet members go and voice our concerns to the appropriate committees, appropriations and Ways and Means and Finance and so forth. But they're on a mission, it seems as though this year. They know they have the numbers, they know they have the supermajority, and I think they're hell-bent on making this happen.
When I asked you about that after the election, you didn't sound overly concerned because you had won 70% of the vote and you thought that gave you some significant credibility, which is hard to argue. Does this surprise you, as you say, that they're hell-bent?
Well, I think, again, we aren't at the end game. We're getting close. We're in the home stretch. But there has to be a realization here that we can't do everything in 1 year. And again, I think about all the good work we've done over the last 6 years to prevent these fees and taxes from increasing. Let's take the motor vehicle fees in particular. And I've heard from legislators, I've heard some of their comments about, well, we haven't kept up with inflation. We need to raise these fees because we have to keep up with inflation. Well, that's not what, we're not a retail shop here. This is state government, and we should provide the services we need at an appropriate amount so that Vermonters can benefit. And we don't have to keep up. We don't have to raise things just for the sake of raising them to keep up with inflation. We should be doing everything we can to keep more money in the pockets of Vermonters, not trying to fill the coffers in Montpelier.
You're referring to the roughly 20% increase that we would all face when renewing a license or a vehicle registration. Let me ask you about
Right.
S-100, the housing bill. Now, we know the Senate agonized over this. There were competing versions, and the sticking point was whether and how far to reform Act 250. You were asked this week at your briefing whether that was a deal breaker if the House does not restore the reform in Act 250, which seems seems unlikely. Treasurer Pieciak, though, spoke out about that the other day and said that he prefers, as you do, prefers the more ambitious housing reform that Senate Economic Development passed. If the House doesn't, if the environmentalists succeed in blocking more meaningful Act 250 reform, is this a deal breaker for you?
Well, it could be, because we need to, if this is truly a crisis, and we've heard this, we've all used the phrase, we have a housing crisis in Vermont. And when you have a crisis, you have to take extraordinary steps in order to get through it, right? To make sure that we allow for the housing that we desperately need. And that will, this is a bottleneck in some respects to our workforce challenges. So if we're really serious about this, then we better take some steps. And maybe they wouldn't be forever. Maybe there'd be some sort of sunset, but we need to take steps to allow for this housing when we have the funding to do it, thanks to the federal delegation and to the feds for providing us with this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do some great things to revitalize Vermont. And one of those areas that I've tried to focus on and been focusing on for 6 years is housing. And the legislature now is finding the same thing. We need to solve this housing crisis. So a part of that, a major part of that, is some regulatory reform, and that's Act 250 and zoning regulations. So again, VLCT, I believe, has withdrawn their support. We'll see what happens in the House, but we need some meaningful steps taken in order to get the end product that we need. So we're not just spinning our wheels. And I think if you speak to a number of Democrats in the House, I think they would agree with what I'm saying.
This week, the Senate's top Democrat defended his chamber's vote to move more slowly on new housing construction.
I think it's a false choice to say that because there's a housing crisis, we have to get rid of our environmental values. And fortunately, in the Senate, we reached a great compromise.
Every family deserves access to high-quality, affordable childcare.
Senator Phil Baruth acknowledges his party is at odds with Governor Scott over new spending and higher taxes to do things like launch universal paid leave and expand access to child care.
He's a man of good faith. I think he means well for all of Vermont, but he's laid down a law for the entire time he's been in office, which is no fees, no taxes. And when you start from that premise, there are a lot of problems you can't solve, no matter how good a heart you have.
Is this a bipartisan issue?
Well, I think it is, and again, it's something that I've spoken about for 6 years. In fact, I have forwarded proposals over the last 6 years to provide more funding for childcare, and that's been rejected, by the way, by the legislature on a number of occasions over the last 6 years. But now they've made a lot of campaign promises, and so we're all wanting to do something. I think our approach is much more pragmatic. As you know, I included $56 million to expand the coverage for those 400% of the poverty level. Those would be provided with help and relief for child care. The legislature, the Senate, has taken a different approach. Not a different approach, it's the same approach, only expanded. They've gone with 600% of the poverty level. So we've taken somewhat the same approach, only theirs is more generous. Theirs would include a payroll tax. And I'm saying we can use the $56 million that I baked into the budget without raising taxes and fees, and then we can do more in the future. But they're working to pay for this by removing such things as the child tax credit that was just put into place less than a year ago, $1,000 for every child for those of lower income. And it seems counterintuitive to me that you would take that away in order to provide more expanded child care when those on the lower end of the economic ladder, so to speak, aren't going to get anything more. In fact, they're going to have their tax credit removed, the $1,000 per child removed, and they're going to have to pay a payroll tax on top of that, and they're not going to get any more benefits. So we are actually hurting those on the lower end with the Senate proposal.
Well, there's a payroll tax attached to the House Universal Paid Family and Medical Leave system as well that would cover essentially all Vermont employees. You've taken a voluntary approach. If you had to choose, if you had to accept one or the other, either the Democrats' child care proposal or the paid family leave proposal, which would it be?
I would choose the Scott administration approach, and I would use what we have is somewhat, being a moderate centrist as I am, ours seems to be right in between what the differences between the House and the Senate with their paid family leave and their child care proposal. Paid family leave is much more important to the House. Child care is much more important to the Senate, and ours falls right in between. So I firmly believe that our approach is the best way to get us where we want to go faster and with less money than either approach taken by the House or the Senate. They want to create a whole new bureaucracy in order to oversee this paid family leave proposal, for instance, which would take about 60 employees. Now, keep in mind, we have 800 employees we're trying to hire today. We have 8,000 employees in total. We can't fill those positions. They want to add more to that, and the IT system and so forth to oversee that. Our volunteer program sets up a structure, and we use an outside source, a private entity. The Hartford Group is going to do this for us, and we're putting this. It's not just a proposal. This is a plan. We're doing this with state employees, so they're going to get this benefit as of July 1. So this is going to be put into place. So then we'll have an opportunity to expand that, see how it works, whether we want to change the plan or not, and if in the future, when we have organic revenue growth, we'll be able to pay for it if that's what they want to do in the future, 3 or 4 years down the road, and we're not going to see their plan come to fruition by the time they have their capital reserves built up and their IT system built, hire all these employees to oversee it and so forth and implement it. It'll be 3 or 4 years. So we can get there faster with our approach for less money.
Speaking of the level of vacancies in state government, the Department of Corrections the other day announced sort of a reform, rebranding initiative to try to make it more attractive to work in our state's prisons and to try to give inmates some new educational resources for the day in which they get out. What's driving that?
Well, again, we need to take a different approach. We have a vast amount of vacancies in corrections in particular, but across every sector, throughout state government, across the state in every sector is facing challenges with workforce. So Commissioner Demmel and his team have put together a proposal to take a different holistic view of what we're doing there. And I think he's moving in the right direction, and hopefully we'll be able to reap the benefits and provide some relief for those workers in the Department of Corrections in particular. But we're facing shortages, whether it's in highway maintenance, or whether it's in the Vermont State Police. Every single sector throughout state government is facing challenges with workforce.
Ahead, we'll discuss immigration, the court battle over abortion medication, and the prospect of Donald Trump returning as the Republican presidential nominee. Scott has other ideas. In our conversation with Governor Phil Scott, we asked about some of the national issues as well. The new polling this week showing Donald Trump the frontrunner for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination.
It is disheartening, surprising to see that he is still a frontrunner.
Did you think it was a mistake for the district attorney in New York to pursue charges over the Stormy Daniels thing? Was it, I mean, did it feed into the former president's claim that, this is just a partisan witch hunt?
Well, I know the district attorney has to do his job. I understand that, but I remember at the time saying in an interview that this better be good. These better be viable charges. If this is just a rehashing of what we already know, I think a different approach could have been taken. I'm not saying that he should be let off the hook, so to speak. But at the same time, I don't think this is going to help the situation unless these are viable charges and lead to something else. Because so far, I haven't heard anything new.
You would prefer a moderate, somebody like Governor Chris Sununu of New Hampshire?
I would prefer a moderate centrist. I would prefer someone who's been a governor. Asa Hutchinson is more conservative than I am, but he's a decent person, and he has said he's throwing his hat in the ring. Chris Sununu would be great, but I'm not sure he's going to run. I don't know. He is certainly doing the circuit and talking about it. But there are other candidates as well that we'll see what happens. But at this point in time, I would prefer a governor, and I would prefer someone who's a moderate, a centrist. I would prefer someone who has integrity and character and treats people with respect and civility.
How about Governor Ron DeSantis?
Well, I mean, again, he's a governor. He's somewhat popular. I don't know him. I've never really met him, to be honest with you. I do know Chris Sununu. I do know Asa Hutchinson. I've met with them, had dinner with them, gone to events with them, and they would fit my, I guess, vision of as someone who would be civil, respectful, and and palatable.
Sununu said on HBO the other night that, if Trump's the nominee, I'll support the nominee of the Republican Party. I'm a Republican. That is not you, though.
That is correct.
Okay. Let me ask you about mifepristone, in the news a lot the last week, the abortion medication that's widely prescribed in this country. On Wednesday night, a federal appeals court partially blocked the decision by the judge in Texas that threatened to block the distribution of mifepristone. I mean, the outrage in Vermont's medical community was something I have never seen before in the wake of that Texas decision. You've said that this sets a bad precedent.
Yeah, I believe that having one judge, albeit a federal judge, stopping the distribution of something that has been with us for decades and has been approved by the FDA and from a judge who has no medical background, being able to do this, I think it does set a dangerous precedent and could lead to other things as well. So I was happy to hear that the appeal was made, and there's a bit of a stay at this point in time, so this takes some of the pressure off. But we will see what happens. I don't know if it will get all the way to the Supreme Court, and I don't know what the outcome would be there, but I would have to hope that calmer heads would prevail, that they would see the merits of this, and that leave it to the experts in the medical field to make these decisions, not in the courts.
Can I ask you about immigration for a moment? There's been a lot of focus on the southern border, but migrants are crossing into Canada and of late coming from Canada into northern New York and Vermont. Has that created a problem for state government, and what is your approach going to be going forward?
Yeah, it hasn't created a problem for us at this point in time. We did see an uptick in the number of migrants coming across the border, the northern border. They seem to be on their way to somewhere else, and we're just a pathway on the way to their final destination. I've said that we will treat them well when they come through Vermont. We will help them in any way we can. But I also believe that the Biden administration, the president getting together with Prime Minister Trudeau has had an effect. It seems to have subsided somewhat. But we're prepared in case we see an influx to help them again get to their final destination. And hopefully, if they're seeking asylum, maybe they would consider Vermont. We certainly could use more diversity. We could use more people in our state, and we have challenges with workforce. So hopefully, we'll have a healthy combination of that in the future.
Governor Phil Scott, many thanks for your time this morning. We'll be watching in these closing weeks of the legislature, and we appreciate you being with us.
Thanks very much, Stuart.
Now, maybe you noticed a problem with the governor's left hand. It turns out he's restoring a vintage snowmobile in his garage and was working on the engine and suffered a little accident over the weekend. He bandaged things himself. We'll be right back.